PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film. What's up, everybody?
I don't even care that you cut me off. It is too early for this shit.
It is too early. We are both struck by allergies, but we are committed. We're committed to doing our show.
No, you're committed. You're committed. I'm just here for the free waffles in the morning.
All right, let me tell you something, folks. This kid over here, this kid,
child, you're a child.
You are like almost half my age, almost. Maybe not quite that far, but you're younger. You should have more energy than I do. And you're complaining about, I had to stay up last night. I had to watch Indiana Jones. I had to watch an Indiana Jones movie. It's like the worst thing in the world, possibly. Oh my God, you're such a bad friend. You're such a horrible person.
Sometimes.
I'm sorry. It made you watch one of the greatest movies of all time. Again, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're a bad person. You're a bad person for framing it that way. Got a lot going on, all right? Like my neighbor's flooding my backyard, or things like that. Things happen, all right?
Things do happen. You're not wrong.
Yeah,
you're not wrong. Life does happen, but life always seems a little bit better when Harrison Ford is on screen with a certain hat, a certain whip, and a cranky old face.
I don't think he looks cranky in these.
He still looks. You could see it forming on him now. Like he's going
to
get there.
Have that, but I don't think he looks like the world's grumpiest person.
No, he's not there. He's not there yet. He's just laying the groundwork for a couple decades later.
Fair. I will give you that. But speaking of that, well, not grumpy really, but it's very interesting. We're here, but I want to talk about another thing that happened this last week, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Okay, yes, we can get
you know why? Because that movie, before we get into this movie, made me cry more than almost any movie I've seen in a while. That movie is way better than it had any right to be.
I don't know what I expected going in. I expected it to be very sad. The way they kind of had marketed the whole thing was that it was going to be a kind of a tearjerker, a little bit of a powerful emotions. James Gunn leaving not only Marvel behind, leaving this trilogy behind, which has been kind of in our lives for the last decade or so. He achieved such a great success with these characters. These like C-list characters. And he straddles that line of humor and stakes so well. I guess I should have known what to expect, but I didn't expect it to hit quite as hard as it did. And there
it is. I was like 100%. I knew I was going to sneeze because of my allergies, and I was hoping it would happen while you were talking instead of me like lolling and waiting on the conversation before I could start talking again. Oh my God, guys, allergy season is the worst.
It is awful. It is awful. I woke up today the same thing. I have like a tissue box. There's tissues screened everywhere around my bed at this point. Like I just can't.
You sound like you're a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I'm just saying. It's funny because there's a lot of talk, especially nowadays, about superhero fatigue and this, that, and the other thing, and like the MCU starting to stall out, and how there's no creative vision in the MCU. And yet I watch Guardians 3 and look back at the trilogy as a whole, and it's like those three movies are going to stand out for a long time and continue to stand the test of time, because they feel so creatively director driven in such a specific capacity. And man, it's just special. I loved the third movie. I just thought it was so excellent.
I did too. I will say it's interesting you mentioned the whole MCU stalling out kind of thing. It's true, because even my son, who's a big MCU stan for a while, he's kind of grown out of the MCU a little bit. He's not been thrilled with a lot of the recent stuff too much, and he said he wanted to go to this one, but like he kind of like he loved it. He loved this one, by the way. He thought it was great. He even got a little misty eyed. He doesn't get misty eyed. By the way home, he's kind of like, Yeah, but now I'm kind of done. Like that was like part of the old guard, and that's what I was really liked about the MCU. And I don't have a lot I'm really looking forward to. Maybe Spider-Man 4, but like I don't know what else I'm really looking forward to. I'm like, it's kind of a sad thing because it is kind of like the end of an era. I feel like James Gunn leaving, these characters leaving, despite the teaser that we got in the second post credits, which we'll talk about, which surprised me a little bit. It does feel like kind of like a passing of the torch. I mean, I know you and I have enjoyed the current MCU outing more than a lot of other people have, um, but it does feel different. Where not this is not your father's MCU anymore, as the saying would be bastardized.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, well, like there is clearly a change into the guard a little bit right now. Um, and that was always going to be a post Endgame problem anyway.
Right.
Like I think people are overblowing it a little bit though
Agreed.
too, because the truth is like phase one of the MCU was not nearly the most beloved. Like it's been a hindsight thing,
Right.
but like most of those first few MCU movies were not like the most well received outside of the first Iron Man.
Right.
Um, and it took a little while for it to find its footing and to figure out what it was doing. And even then, like there are some parts of phase two that people are hard on also. Like, I don't know. I think people love to be romantic about stuff that they love and they don't really think about like the reality of it. And that's not to say there is not real fatigue. There is. I think that there was too much between the movies and the television in a short span of time that
Yeah.
uh, hurt a lot of interest because some of the shows weren't perfect and great. The TV side felt like phase one of the original phase one. So
Right.
there's there's some growing pains, there's some learning curves, and you can feel it in pretty much all of the different shows.
Well, I think it's also had to do with like what Bob Iger's trying to do now is slow it down because it just seemed
Right.
like there was never a chance to breathe. It was always like if I miss something, whatever, I'll catch the next one and I'll get caught up that way, kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of like what Star Wars did too. Kathleen Kennedy recently had an interview where she said she wants to eventize Star Wars again, make it a big moment, and like because you kind of need that build up of anticipation to really get the moment. With MCU, the same thing. If we can kind of spread it out a little bit more, we have that chance to miss it. So that when he
Yeah.
comes back, we're like, ah, yes. Now it kind of feels like Ant-Man came out. We're kind of like, okay, Ant-Man's done. Now what's now Guardians is up. All right, good, Guardians is up. Now what's and it's just like there was no stop to the roller coaster. And if you have a nonstop roller coaster, then even the biggest of thrills just seem like kind of like, okay, next.
Yeah, but you also have to your point, it's also about the quality of that roller coaster too.
True, but that's part and parcel with it because of all that
Oh
nonstop
yeah.
activity. It just everybody has a chance. It doesn't have a chance to. Even the creators need that same pause and break before you kind of keep going. It just seems it's the same on all ends.
Yeah, and it's funny because I mean it's been 5 years, 6 years since the last Guardians movie. On top of it, like
Right,
which is wild to think about. Like the characters sort of get lost in the shuffle of this type of stuff, which you don't really think about later. And that's not necessarily supposed to be a dig, but like a lot of these trilogies and these characters, like their standalone films, get put by the wayside for bigger crossover events sometimes. And
right,
that's exactly what happened here. And like once you see Guardians 3, it's also not lost on me that Gunn doesn't seem that thrilled about that.
right.
There's a lot of passive aggressiveness towards the MCU and the things that happened in Infinity War with those characters,
Yeah,
and he handles it in such a way that's actually like relatively refreshing ultimately, even though like he's clearly been dealt a certain hand that he may not necessarily have liked, but he found a way to make it work and still ended up making a movie that is this emotionally resonant.
and true. It stayed
Yeah.
true. It doesn't didn't there's no cheap rug pulling and like, oh, we're gonna retcon certain things because we don't want that to be. We want this. I want the way I want it to happen. I had the story written out or something. No. He commits to what happened to the characters. It's okay. Well, let me see what these characters have gone through. Now, how do I make that work with what the story I want to tell? And
Yeah.
he succeeds greatly.
Yeah, it's actually super impressive, and I guess the whole reason I kinda wanted to bring it up is just because as we're talking about all this stuff, like I think it's lost on people how nice it is sometimes. Like I'm not big on like thinking that auteur cinema is like really important all the time. Like I don't. I think that there's almost too much emphasis put on people need to always be auteur like when they make movies. Uh, but that is also not to say that it can be really thrilling when a very specific voice can be so defining in certain aspects, and those Guardians movies feel that for me. And especially in a machine that feels as large and as all encompassing as the Marvel universe right now, it's kind of nice when someone like Gunn can go in and leave a mark the way that he did.
I'll say it in clear. It feels like a little bit like Marvel and Star Wars and these big franchises are kind of feel like factory like in a way. Like they kind of like the director
Oh,
put
100%.
in. You get put through the prism of what they're doing, and it comes out feeling a little homogenous at times. But Gunn is one of the directors who really stood out and made his voice clear. And he kind of went into the factory, kind of burst out of the factory instead of like letting the factory close in on him, so to speak. You definitely tell it's a James Gunn movie. He's a strong, solid voice, and all of this leads me to believe, to be excited for his Superman take, because I remember when he took over the DC and I heard that he was writing and directing the first Superman. I kind of got caught up in this whole like, well, Superman's a much different like guard. He's much more of
I
a
give you
reverent
so much shit for that.
character. Much
I
more of
would
a
give
reverent character. Like I felt like this was not the right tone. But then I kind of went back and watched Guardians 3, and then I have a totally different outlook on it now,
I
which
think
you already had.
people yeah, I was gonna say, like, I felt like people were so, like, grossly inaccurate on how they saw that. Like, I know that Gunn is very specific flavor, but he's also good at what he does, and, like,
Yeah,
if you can look at a dude who did Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy, Peacemaker, and Slither, and, like, kind of these off-brand things, but the one thing that is true to all of them is that he gets outsiders and he gets heart, and
right,
that's gonna be the most important thing for a Superman project.
right.
This dude made people care about a rocket and a raccoon in a tree.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Um,
Like,
I I do agree with you down more because I did at the core of
yeah,
it. It's just more of the outer trappings where we're so used to seeing him with these bizarre characters, these eccentric
bizarro
characters,
characters.
bizarro characters.
Eh,
But a James Gunn doing a bizarre movie, I would get. James Gunn doing like the prime central powerhouse of DC is a little bit more of a stretch from what we've seen from him. But I have more confidence now because the core will be there. You just gotta I think he's gotta rein himself in a little bit on the edges, I think, for the Superman movie to work.
I wanna know what the soundtrack for that movie is already.
Yeah, he's definitely gonna
Well,
getting the needle drops for sure.
he said he would, just like Guardians when he was doing it, that he had written the soundtrack as he was working on the movie.
It seems to be
And
how he works.
yeah, and he seemed really excited about a bunch of the needle drops, and I was like, "Well, now I wanna know what's on there." Like, he's
It's
honestly, man, it's so funny because I love movie scores, and we're gonna get into that specifically with the movie that we're gonna be talking about tonight.
of course, oh
But,
yeah.
like, it's funny, the soundtrack for the Guardians movies is its own character at this point,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've been nonstop listening to all 3 of them again, but the soundtrack for Volume 3 is so interesting because it's so varied comparative to the first 2, because of a character defining moment of getting a Zune in another movie.
Right.
It is no longer just like classic rock. It's still classic rock dominant, but there's some other music in it, and it's very interesting the songs he chooses and like from what decades and the way it's done.
Right.
Um, I was really impressed. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to listen to the acoustic version of Creep now without tearing
Yeah, that's a good point. Another one I have to mention specifically is I've made it. Yeah, it's a point. It's obvious, clear. I'm a little older than you are. So music, I'm coming from a slightly different, slightly older generation as far as that goes. So Florence and the Machine, for example, is not a big staple in my music collection. They were a little bit after my prime music time. I went back to the classic rock era, the 80s rock era. I was aware of Florence and the Machine. I did not like them, but it wasn't any song. I never really connected with them to a point where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
cool, Florence and the Machine. I fucking love that song now. Dog Days, like that needle drop at the end there was just so perfect. It actually got me tearing up right then and there for it. Let alone as I watched the video later on of Florence actually watching watching the needle drop and having her get all excited and teared up about it. That just was awesome too. But yeah, Gunn has a way of making you not even reevaluate a song, but you see it in a different fashion, and it's just like you can't hear it the same way ever again.
Oh, 100% accurate, man. I love it so much, and I just really was so impressed. And obviously, like, this is a very different podcast, and I don't want to get into like the Guardians of it all without wanting to spoil everything. But man, it is so emotional. And I keep going back to that thought of just like I sobbed through the movie, and it wasn't like once. It was like several separate times that Gunn was able to get such specific emotion
Right.
that was so like surprising to me. And I just wasn't prepared for it.
Don't worry about getting into it too far. You wait like 3 or 4 years. We're getting to phase 4 of the MCU. And by that point, we'll get there. And so 3 or 4 years from now, you can bring all your way into Guardians of the Galaxy 3 at that point.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a good damn movie. And I've also been I've been living with a lot of the themes and the stuff that it's been saying, and it's just very interesting because it feels so true and so real, and like it's saying something so poignant in so many different ways, and you're like, good lord, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Man, I just keep wanting to talk about it. I just get very excited. It's a nice time to be excited, and I bet you we find out who's playing Superman soon because, with everything going on with the writer's strike,
They
well, yeah, and the studio's already said that like Gunn's Superman Legacy script was already finished before everything happened, so they can try to move forward at least.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see if they try to pivot some of what's going on because, every day it seems like the news from the writer's strike is not getting any better, which
and then we got the fucking directors and actors strike coming too, potentially.
Like very much just looming.
I don't even I try to talk about it too much because it just depresses me. Like, on so many different angles. I want these creatives to get their fair due.
They need their bag, dude.
They need their bag. They're fighting. We are pro WGA here, definitively. At the same time, we also lament the fact that, man, this is mean a lot for us in the near future as far as our favorite forms of entertainment. And that's secondary, obviously that's secondary, but it is a part and parcel with some of the conversation. But so the whole thing just sucks for everybody. I just wish I hope the studios will just get off their asses, figure out that they need to do right by these creatives and make them that they have livable wages, livable
incomes,
the right everything they need to get done to give us the stuff that you make money off of. So it's hard to think that they can't really. They think they can wait it out, but this is not good. This is not good, and I hope that they come to their senses sooner than later. I kind of feel like part of me feels like they're waiting for the actors and directors thing to come up, and then they kind of take care of it all at once, potentially. I hope I'm wrong because that means we're gonna be waiting still for a bit on that. But that's my own particular interpretation of how things are going down so far.
I just think there's a bunch of old people who don't want to give up money, and they're trying so hard to be, especially with the AI boom all of a sudden, where they think that I don't even want to get into all that, but this that talk about AI writing scripts and then hiring writers to just rework that stuff. It's like, no, stop that, man. Like,
that's awful. That is absolutely awful. I can't. I don't want to think about that because it's going to happen too. That's the thing. It's going to happen, and we're going to watch a movie, and we won't even know it too. We'll watch a movie, and it's going to be shitty, and then we're not going to even realize. We'll never even really know why. And then later on, years later, we'll find out. Oh, that's why.
I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like we're gonna know because you look at any of this stuff and it just is so obviously
Dry.
like
Yeah.
dry. Yeah. I mean, and stuff is
Human.
already kind of being made by an algorithm. We're
Right.
seeing people talk about it a ton lately for obvious reason when you look at how some of the streaming services, what was it that one Ghosted that just came out
Yeah.
with Ana de Armas and Chris Evans, and like they were talking about that they cut the original opening of the movie that Dexter Fletcher wanted because, well, it doesn't quite fit the algorithm. And you read that, and it's like, good lord, man, no, stop that.
No, totally stop that. It led to something pretty shitty because I mean I haven't watched the movie, but here's a good taste test. Richard Eric Jarvie of Class Action of PLD Projects gave it 1 star and literally turned off Ghosted halfway through and did not return to it. And Richard Eric Jarvie is a guy who likes this is exact kind of movie that should be right up his alley. And that's the way that's the product we're getting now. And it's just not it's incomprehensible to me.
I think that we are getting to a place that is very, very dangerous
Yep,
with all this stuff.
I agree.
The more I look at how some of these studios and especially the streamers, because Netflix is notorious for this, throwing movie stars in movies with a kind of known-ish director and just tanking
Yeah.
the actual like possibilities of it. Because you look at Red Notice,
Yep.
there's nothing memorable about that movie. That is a movie that's got Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, and The Rock.
Nothing.
It was supposed to be a franchise, but what the hell happened there? I mean, do you really want to make another one of those? Like, no one talks about it. There's no lasting power because they don't have anything to say. There's no personality. Their movie's just chasing
Right.
an algorithm. They think that, hey, put these 3 people that are super popular in a movie from the dude who directed Dodgeball. It'll do great.
Right.
And then you're like, nah.
You need, and that seems to me, you need something. This is where like the WJ comes in. You need that writing. You need the people to write a good movie.
You sneezing over there?
I did.
Yeah.
I paused a little
You
bit.
tried to mute yourself like I wouldn't call you out on it.
I did.
Wow. And there he goes again. Just saying.
Yeah, it is what it is. But I will say that there is something I am excited about. Let's bring it back to something positive. I got 4 words for you: The Life of Chuck. Life of
You
Chuck.
sneezed again. So The Life of Chuck?
Do you know what that is? Do you remember
No.
that title? That is the thing. You are very excited about it. You're
Am I?
very extremely excited about it. Yes.
Yes, this is the Mike Flanagan project.
Yes, it is. It's Tom Hiddleston and Mark Hamill teaming up with
You act
Mike
like I was
Flanagan.
actually right. And then I went, oh, wait, yes, I do know what we're talking about.
Tom Hiddleston and Mark Hamill teaming up with Mike Flanagan for a film of a Stephen King adaptation. Surprisingly, shocking. I'm shocked that Mike Flanagan's doing a
Shocked. I
Stephen
can't
King
believe that
adaptation.
Mike Flanagan's doing another Stephen King adaptation.
But they're going to be doing an adaptation of The Life of Chuck, which is a short story anthology. If It Bleeds, it's 3 short stories. I guess they put together, which is the life of this character Chuck, and begins with him like dying as a 39-year-old man from a brain tumor, and then it goes backwards. And the last part of it is him in a childhood in a supposedly haunted house. Which kind of wraps the whole thing together. I don't even care about the story for it. I'll be honest with you. Like, I just know that I love Mike Flanagan. I love Mike Flanagan directing any kind of Stephen King adaptation. I love Tom Hiddleston. I fucking love Mark Hamill. This is gold to me. I've been waiting for a Mike Flanagan film since Doctor Sleep.
I know. It feels like it's been forever.
And I love his series. This is nothing against it. I love his series that he's done. I've watched every single one. I've been excited about it. But Mike Flanagan back on the silver screen. Oh, give it to me now.
Well, not just that, Mark Hamill getting to be one of the leads is just supremely exciting to me.
Great.
I think that with someone like Mark, it's good to see him getting a chance to act in a bigger thing like this again that is so vastly different than the stuff that he is known for doing.
Right.
And like Flanagan he worked with Mark on what is it, The Fall of House Usher?
Yes, which hasn't come out yet. But
no, which is a Netflix series that should be this summer.
Yeah,
I would guess, or this fall. But you look at it, and they worked on that together. Things clearly must have gone very well. And then someone like Hiddleston is such a supremely talented individual. I want to be able to see him working with someone like Flanagan too, because Flanagan gets the best out of everyone he works with. It like
Right.
I find he continues to just get incredible performances out of everyone around him, and he's good at giving guys like now Mark Hamill, but like Bruce Greenwood
Hmm.
a
Yep.
chance to do stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of them, and giving them like real material to let them act and show off their skill. And I mean, even looking at and I always feel bad. I always forget his name, but uh the kid from ET.
Henry Thomas.
Thank you, Henry Thomas. I always remember the Henry part and never remember. And it's not like any dig at Henry Thomas. He's really talented, but he's like one of those hey you
Name.
guy names.
Yeah. It's also a very just two like first names. It's like Henry Tom.
Yeah.
Henry.
But like he's let Henry Thomas become this incredibly gifted actor.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, come on, man.
And this one in particular, I love that. This really screams to me. Like Tom Hiddleston in this role screams to me he's going to do um, for Tom Hiddleston's performance, something what he did with Ewan McGregor's performance. So Ewan McGregor in Doctor Sleep, he just got the best out of Ewan McGregor, I think. I think we'll get the best out of Tom Hiddleston. I can't wait to see this come out.
Me too. I'm just very, very excited to see. And now I guess that's what I was getting at is like to see all that, but then to see him work with someone like Hiddleston, and like Hiddleston's gotten to work with Del Toro in the
Right.
past. And I know that, people have their feelings or whatever about that movie, but like I love seeing Hiddleston doing things like this. He is a supremely talented actor.
Yeah. I mean, he's been definitely, I don't want to say stuck in Loki form because, I mean, he's done wonderful things with Loki, but he's been with pretty much Loki almost nonstop for the most part. So it's good to see him outside of that box as well.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I was getting at. Was it's going to be nice to see him play outside that box, but also in such a specific way that allows him to
Right.
do what he wants to do. And
Absolutely.
I'm very excited about that.
Definitely. Definitely. Woo, good stuff coming up for that. So that was a nice little sandwich. We had the shit stuff in the middle, get nice little Guardians there. Mike Flanagan here. I think this is the time when we should move forward on to our actually topic of the day.
You want to move forward, word.
I want to move forward word. Yes,
Yeah.
I see what you're trying to do there. Like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to make a new word so that we can, all right. Get in the way back machine. All right, let's go because it's time to go back to 1981. All right, Wayne's World, calm down. Is this the Steven Spielberg ending?
It might be.
So let's go ahead and get in the way back machine, and we're going back to the summer of 1981. We're going to be talking about the Steven Spielberg directed, Lawrence Kasdan written, George Lucas created, Harrison Ford starring blockbuster that is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes, I said what I said. The movie has, since its initial release in 1981, been renamed to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I'm just going to keep saying that thing because I know that it's just like salt in the wound for certain people for some reason, which I don't understand. But
It's kind of like, yeah, we were talking about before. It feels like some people just, they'll change. It changed the movie or something somehow for them, or they got pissy about it. I mean, the same happened with Star Wars Episode 4. It used to just be called Star Wars, and now because it became a big franchise, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. And
it's very George Lucas set properties is what we're getting at.
That is what we're getting at. But to me, I also love the fact now it actually just feels like it connects to the rest because the rest of the movies are Indiana Jones and something. And it just feels like a great serial title, which is basically what this is. It's supposed to be a serial adventure from the 30s and 40s that George Lucas grew up with.
And I got to ask, because we're talking about it. Is there a new movie coming out right now? Is that why we're talking about this? Is there a rhyme or reason? Oh, wait, you guys didn't hear? We haven't talked your ear enough about the fact that Dial of Destiny comes out in like a month and a half, and I am the most excited I could be about legitimately anything other than Michael Keaton donning the Batman suit in the same summer again.
we have Indiana Jones back in the theaters. I didn't ever think it was going to happen again. After King of the Crystal Skull had the divisiveness that it was, but we'll get to that when we talk about King of the Crystal Skull,
You
as
mean the good movie?
we are staunch defenders of King of the Crystal Skull here on To Be Different Way Teams on Film.
That great Indiana Jones movie? Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. But regardless, not everybody felt like we did. So there was this kind of like thought that it might have run its course, it might be over. And then when this was announced, was talked about, actually was rumored for a while, then it was announced. It kind of kept getting pushed back, kept getting like, it kind of felt like, is this movie going to come out? Is Harrison Ford going to age out to the point where he can't do it anymore? Because there's going to come a time when physically Harrison Ford won't be able to do stuff like this anymore. I mean, the guy is what, 80, 82, 83, or 81? So he's getting up there at this point.
Yeah.
But then here it is. I finally I wasn't sure what was going to happen until I finally saw the first like teaser, and then I went, okay, now it's real. Now shit is on. Let's fucking go. But now, yeah, I see the second teaser, which I even liked even more than the first one, and the trailer rather more than the teaser. I cannot wait. I was bawling at the trailer. I don't know how I'm going to react to the actual movie itself.
I'm so excited. James Mangold is supremely talented, and
Yes.
I think that if anyone was going to give Indy one last ride off into the sunset, and it wasn't going to be Spielberg, Mangold seems like such a fine choice. That he's the ultimate dad movie filmmaker, and I'm going to say it right now, man. Like, the Indiana Jones series to this day continues to be one of the all-time great dad franchises, and like that seems like such a backhanded compliment, but it's not. Like, to me, dad movies are like these movies that when you're younger and you've got TNT on in the middle of a day on the weekend, and like Armageddon comes on, and your dad's like, "Man, what a movie," and he's just gonna put it on in the background. Like, that is what these movies have become, right? Like, if they're on, the dad of the family is like, well, that's what we're watching the rest of the day. Like, you can suck it up. Like, who cares about whatever else is happening? Like, Twister's on. Fuck you. We're watching Twister. Like, get the rest of this out of here. You know, like, that's what the movies Mangold makes are. Like, you look at Ford v Ferrari. That is straight up dads in 20 years being like, fuck your Sacramento Kings game. I'm watching the Ford v Ferrari movie. Like,
as the dad of this household, as the big time, I am the dad. I fully agree with you, and that's exactly what happens.
Right, exactly. That's my point. Like, Mangold's good at that. Copland, dad movie. Identity, dad movie. The Wolverine, dad movie. Yeah, like Logan, dad movie that makes dad actually feel emotions.
Right. Yeah. And it's a comic book dad movie. That's what it is. It's like you can sucker in the dads who aren't even big comic book guys, because you just got to get sucked into the humanity of the characters.
Yeah, and it feels like a Western. And you know what else he made? 3:10 to Yuma, dad movie.
And I gotta say something. This might be controversial. I don't want to be negative. This might tread on negative a little bit. I love Steven Spielberg is the greatest director of all time, as far as I'm concerned.
You're damn right he is.
He has done so many amazing things, and I have nothing but love for him. But at the same time, he has kind of grown a little bit out of his swashbuckling adventure days to a degree.
He's a very different filmmaker now.
He really is, and it shows. He is more comfortable, more happy doing things like The Post, doing things like Fabelmans, doing things like Lincoln, and he does phenomenal jobs at those movies. He's not the Indiana Jones director anymore. So for this final Indiana Jones movie, I almost feel it's nice to give someone like Mangold this shot at this point, because it feels like it needs a little bit more of the adventure kick that Spielberg has done in his time. And he has more than earned the right to do what he wants to do and to be the kind of filmmaker he wants to be. And I appreciate him for that. But it's okay that he doesn't do this. I love the fact that I heard the quote he used when he got a chance to see the finished version, where he said, "Wow, I thought I was the only one who knew how to make these." That's a great, great not approval for me. So
I mean, I think that's the biggest not of approval possible. And at the end of the day, I mean, look, I also don't expect that he's going to say really anything else.
I don't either.
I'm going to call a spade a spade. It is what it is. Like, you're not going to be like, man, yeah, that dude really screwed up the Indiana Jones franchise. Because, I mean, look, there's a lot of nerds who think Spielberg already did.
Yeah, that's true.
Or they try not to blame him and they just lay all the blame on Lucas's feet, which is its own
Ridiculous.
brand of that's a whole lot of special. But
That's a whole lot of cockamamie nonsense, but that's okay.
yeah, it's just funny to me because at the end of the day, it's like I just want to love another Indiana Jones movie, and if someone does it that is not Spielberg, then by all means, let's celebrate that.
Yeah, and Spielberg definitely approves of it, which is a good thing too. And again, you're right. Of course, he's not going to come out and say it sucks, but at the same time, he probably wouldn't say anything. I think that's the way he would pull it. And but he seemed like he's very happy with the decision. He's very happy with the product, and they all seem very happy with the product. And they seem legitimately happy. You're not wrong that they're not going to say anything bad about it, but it just feels like they are satisfied with what's coming out.
100%. And so I'm very excited for it, but I gotta say, man, here's the thing, right? Like, we don't get to Dial of Destiny without a little adventure along the way. And that's where we start with the 1981 blockbuster of the same name, now celebrating its 42nd year of birth on this world.
My God.
I know.
God.
I know.
I feel so old. I feel so old.
I mean, here's me.
Not the years, it's the mileage.
I was right. It is 42nd, not 43rd.
Right, 42nd.
Yeah. Yes. I was right, and I talked myself out of it.
Here's the 43rd anniversary of Friday the 13th,
yes,
which came out.
We were talking about that earlier.
That's what it was. So 42nd for Indiana Jones.
I'm wearing my 40th anniversary Raiders of the Lost Ark shirt and everything for this. This is my second favorite movie of all time. Yeah. This movie was supremely affecting on me when I was younger. I remember watching this movie on VHS, stereophonic 4x3 VHS as a child in the little black slip cover that it had, which had the re-release poster of the movie. The Return of the Great Adventure poster, the one not by Drew Struzan.
Right, yep.
This movie and the entire franchise, really, but this movie in particular, it just left a mark on me. Like most of Spielberg's filmography, and George Lucas's filmography at a very young age. Like, it didn't matter if they wrote it or produced it or directed it or whatever. Like, somehow you look at a lot of the stuff I love, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indy, like, these guys are all around it and involved. American Graffiti, like, that they just were. Willow, yeah, exactly. Like, so much of the stuff that I love, The Goonies.
Yep, absolutely.
Like, those movies from the 80s that I grew up loving and watching so frequently, these ones in particular always stood out. And I think it was because in rewatching this last night, I mean, it's got to be like the millionth time I've seen it at this point. There's this grand feel of adventure and tangibleness to this world, and this way the story is told and the way that the characters are. And there's just something so thrilling about it. And as a kid, it was just so it encapsulated my imagination in such a specific way that I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was little because I thought it was what that life would be like. As a kid, that's what it looked like. And it was so cool and it was so fun. And I just remember being so enamored with it when I was younger. I would get the books based off of, because there was a line of Bantam books. Right. I think there's 12 of them all together. I still own all of them. I've read all of them. I got all the Dark Horse comics. Like, the Indiana Jones franchise became like a defining personality trait for me. I dressed up as the character more than once for Halloween. Like, when I was younger and the Indiana Jones ride was opening at Disneyland, I followed the progression of that at a very young age through like magazines and stuff, to the point that I was begging my parents to take me. It's opening summer. And I had to learn to like walk this long walking path around my house that they had created in the neighborhood. And once I could walk it on my own without needing to be carried, they would take me to Disneyland so I could ride the ride.
So you had trading. That's awesome.
My parents were like, we are not dragging a 5-year-old to Disneyland and carrying him.
Right. Absolutely. That's a smart play by your parents. Absolutely.
They fucking played me like a fiddle, and it worked. 'Cause I wanted to go, man. I wanted to ride the ride.
Yeah.
And so all this to say, then, we had these 3 movies and we watched them, and then, like, 2008 rolls around and I'm graduating from high school, and, like, my whole life I'd had the 3 movies, and I'm graduating from high school, and the, like, last big blockbuster that summer before I graduated was Kingdom of the
Yeah,
Crystal
no, that's
Skull,
right.
and it kind of bookended that weird time of, like, adolescence for me. And now here we are, I'm 33, staring down the barrel of one more movie.
Right. Right. It's
And
impressive.
it's crazy how defining all of this has been, but it all comes back to sitting down on the couch as a kid watching Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Absolutely. I want to toss in a couple of personal anecdotes that I have about this movie as
Yeah.
well. Similar things. I grew up with this film as well. I mean, Star Wars was my number one joy. That was always one I gravitated back towards, but this was probably number two right after that. I mean not only because it had Harrison Ford in it, so Han and Indy at the same time. But this is still the love of maps for me. I would love to
Yeah.
have maps go around. So I was like, I want to draw my direction of
Yeah.
travel and stuff. I used to love doing that. I dress as Indy all the time. I turn my robe tie robe into my whip and wherever I could. And hell, it stayed through me. I watched it in high school and college. I went to college. My senior year in college, we had I was part of the theaters. I was a theater major, and we had what's called the theater ball, which is a kind of a costume ball or whatever. And I went as Indiana Jones, and my friend went as Sean Connery as the father. And so we went the whole time quoting back and forth. My best part, I dressed up, and in my pocket, I put this little tape recorder. So once in a while, I just press play, and the indie theme would start playing. And so I'd, you know,
I love that.
just
I
kind of
love
cool.
that. That makes me so happy.
And it's just that part of my life. I'd always go back to indie, but like you said, for a long time. I mean, granted, right, indie was done that whole time. We got
Right.
this sense of Kingdom Crystal Skull coming back. I was like in the theaters going, "Yes, give me more Indiana Jones." Um, it's always been with me, but I am older now. I'm an old man. I'm in my late 40s now, and here we go. I got one more Indiana Jones left in me, and but it all comes down to that first couple of movies that I got to watch on the couch multiple
Mhm.
times. It's even, I gotta say, Indiana Jones is one of the few series I can say. My dad was the movie. I think I mentioned this before. My dad was the movie guy. He's the one who took me to movies all the time. My
Right.
mom never, very, very, very rarely went to movies. But one of the movies I did get to go see with my mom is the one she took me to was Temple of Doom. So I
Yeah.
have that in my mind as well. So there's a lot of love in my head for Indiana Jones, and every time I watch this, it's one of those things I just get transported back to being a kid again.
Yeah. I mean, I just sit and I get so enamored, and it's hard to look away. And I get
Yeah,
like, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen it. The moment it starts, I'm just back.
right,
And that's where I am. I'm back in this adventure again that I've seen a million times over, and yet I'm so enthralled by what's happening. I can barely put like I can't focus on anything other than the movie.
right,
And that is just good storytelling, number one. But the funny thing is that this movie almost didn't exist in the form that it exists in now. Like,
right.
people forget that originally it was not gonna be Harrison Ford. That was originally who Spielberg wanted,
Yep,
and Lucas said no. He didn't want Ford because he thought that people would think that he couldn't write a character for anyone else
right.
because
Yeah,
he was coming off of Star Wars, and then you look at American Graffiti, like, he'd already worked with him twice to that point. And
agree.
so he was like, "No, we want Tom Selleck." And, you can see it. The screen tests with Tom Selleck are out there. They exist. Like, he was well on his way to being Indiana Jones, and then I think it was NBC.
Magnum PI.
Yeah,
Yep,
they pulled the Magnum PI card and said, "Absolutely not. We have our TV show, and he's contracted."
right.
Um,
Thank
and
God.
it was, yeah, yeah. I mean, thank God.
No slights to Tom Selleck. He's a fine actor, and I think he probably would have done a hell of a job back in the day, obviously. But he was no Harrison Ford for this role.
No, and here's the thing. Selleck looks a lot older these days than Ford does. Like, because he's still doing, what is it, Blue Bloods,
Blue
I think.
Bloods. Yep, yep.
And you look at that, man, and I'm gonna be honest, like, he's showing his age. He looks old. There's no world where Dial of Destiny exists if Tom Selleck ends up being in that role.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
we may not even make it past the first movie. We don't
right.
know. Like there's every chance it never gets farther.
No, it feels like because Tom Selleck has, and I don't want to be negative of Tom Selleck 'cause I do like Tom Selleck, but I kind of feel like Tom
I
Selleck
love
has
Tom Selleck. This is not like a dig or anything,
he's not
you
a
know.
movie star charisma kind of guy. He's a good TV star charisma kind of guy. And I don't mean that as a slight, but I don't know if he can
Hey
carry a
man,
franchise trilogy like Indiana Jones.
look, we're gonna put respect on the name of the movie that is
Quickly
Quickly
Down
Down
Under.
Under. Yeah,
Yeah, well, how many movies did that get in that franchise?
I'm just saying
And
we're gonna
that's we're
respect.
saying the same thing though. We're saying the same thing.
I don't care. I'm just saying put respect on Quickly Down Under. That man can lead a movie if it's Quickly Down Under.
He can lead a movie, and it won't be a franchise though.
That's not true. There is 2 movies in the, Three Men and series.
Okay, so if Indiana Jones had Tom Selleck, Ted Danson, and Steve Guttenberg, maybe we would have got a second Indiana Jones
Yes,
movie
correct.
potentially.
Yeah, that's basically what we're getting at. I mean, look, Steven Guttenberg could have been Jock at the beginning of the movie.
Could have, yeah, absolutely. Ted Danson, I don't know what he gets to play. Maybe he gets to play. Not he gets to play Marcus,
Yeah,
younger,
he gets to
younger
be
Marcus Brody, maybe.
I was gonna say, or you just make him Belloc. I mean,
Belloc, he could be Belloc, could be the villain, I guess.
Ted Danson would be good at that. I almost said Ted Lasso, and I
I
was like,
know.
that is a very different, thing altogether. Ted Lasso, no thank you in these movies.
No, that would be really strange. Really, really, very, very strange. Although I
But,
could kind of see Beard doing it, maybe, but maybe Beard being
oh,
Indiana
I
Jones.
mean, Beard could be in anything.
That's true. That's fair. That's fair.
Peggy Star. All right. So this movie comes out in 1981. It's a huge smash sensation, but this is all birthed from the fact that he's had this idea kind of floating around in his mind since the 70s.
Yeah.
And the weekend that Star Wars opened, he went to Hawaii with Spielberg
Yep. Yep.
and they sat on the beach. And Lucas thought that, Star Wars was going to bomb. Like that was kind of how it was looking. Everyone seemed to be pretty down on Star Wars at that point and hadn't opened. So he went out there to kind of be away from it as best as possible. And in that weekend, he pitched to Spielberg the Raiders of the Lost Ark Indiana Jones idea.
He'd been playing with a friend since like 1975-ish or so. Of course,
Yeah,
back then it was Indiana Smith.
correct. Well, thank God for that also being changed. And so eventually, yeah, little things. But he wanted to basically take the serial films of the 30s and 40s and try to find a way to do it their way. And Spielberg was wanting to get away from some of the flashier big budget stuff that he had been doing with like Close Encounters and Jaws. He wanted to do something a little bit more restrained. Now, it was still made for $20 million. Like, let's not pretend it wasn't made for some sort of money. But he wanted to do something that was a lot less refined. Because, he had just been doing stuff like 1941 and, that famously was like a pretty big bomb and like not well received. And he was ready to take a swing at something that was a little different. And he had just done ET, and this felt like the next step. Or he would just do ET, 82. Whatever.
Right.
1980? My year got screwed up.
80. Yeah. Yes.
I'm looking now because now I'm like, yeah, so he would do ET after, but he wants to do this as like the weird palate cleanser of himself as a filmmaker before he moves into doing other things. And so they decide to shoot this scrappy little movie around the world with Harrison Ford punching Nazis. And it becomes a standout success the year it opens. To date, this movie has made like $380.9 million at the box office.
God. Amazing.
Yeah. And this movie ends up being just this huge debut. It earns, what was it, like $8.3 million, number one at its box office, ahead of Clash of the Titans and History of the World Part 1. but it starts to be leggy. Like,
Yeah.
6 months after the release, it's still going, and
Right.
it's still going. In 1982, they re-release it. They put out a new poster for it. The movie keeps going. Raiders just keeps
Keeps
moving.
going. Yeah.
Like, this movie ends up being one of the biggest hits of the year because it just keep apparently, it's still considered the leggiest film ever released.
Is it really? That makes sense,
Yeah.
I guess. The only other thing,
It
I mean, yeah,
and it was estimated to have sold over 77 million tickets
that's
during
amazing.
its run.
That's amazing.
77 million tickets to Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this movie starts to define an entire generation of people who love this type of filmmaking, love these types of things, and enjoying it the way that they do, and capturing the imagination of people like you and I when we'd find it either in theaters and or on VHS.
Well, I think
And
it's kind of a generational thing as well that even more than Star Wars could be because like Star Wars was huge at the time and had similar success, but as a sci-fi movie, it has a more specific audience, whereas Indiana Jones has a more far-reaching audience, especially when it comes to like, dads and people who are into sci-fi and kids could go still have the adventure fun. It's reminiscent of those old 30 serials, 40 serials, swashbuckling adventure films. It has a character at the center of Indiana Jones who really kind of is that guy that every man wants to be and every woman wants to be with, kind of that thing that can go. At the same time, though, it's almost deceptive at how much he is because there's so many times where he's not the greatest man in the movie. Like he ends up bumbling his way through more often than not. He has moments where he fails more than he succeeds, but he somehow, with the right luck, with the right
overcomes the odds.
overcomes never tell me the odds. I know it's the wrong character, but same type of scenario at that point. So it ends up being so much of a draw to pretty much everyone. Everyone loves an Indiana Jones movie.
100% accurate. And to your point, one of the things that I love about these movies, and this movie in particular, in Ford's portrayal of Indy, is the human factor. And it's
Exactly.
so funny because I was watching Air Force One last week, and I had tweeted this thread, and it still remains relevant even in rewatching Raiders of the Lost Ark, is that
Yeah,
Harrison Ford is the greatest everyman hero of all time. And I
absolutely.
don't mean just Indiana Jones. I mean Harrison Ford is the best actor to ever play an everyman hero. Period. Just period.
Yep.
Because he makes every character he's ever played the most relatable version of that character.
Right.
And that's what is so thrilling, is that you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, you look at Air Force One. In one of these movies, he's the president of the United States, but to everyone around us looking at it, he's just a
Yeah.
dad trying to save his daughter in by any means,
His
and he's
family.
yeah, exactly. And you look at it and like the way he plays these roles, there's an innate human factor that he focuses on, and that's he never feels like he's in control of the situation. He
Right.
is perfect at selling the situation as he's in over his head every single time. There's little ticks to the way that he puts his head down in a moment of like resigning defeat. There's a moment of a hand twitching in a certain way that is a nervous tick in a situation where he is having to hold a gun and he's going to shoot someone and he doesn't necessarily want to do it.
Right.
In Raiders, it's the tired quality of this adventure is never ending. I just want to sleep.
Yep.
Everything hurts. I'm tired. Like that is, he just looks so resigned to pain.
Hmm.
And yet you can't look away because once the movie is going, he is rocketed on this adventure in the way that we are, but he is ready to just retire and sleep already. And yet you can't help but love that everyman quality about him. Like that's why the fight scene between him and that giant fucking Nazi in front of the plane is so great, because there's the continual like, all right, fine. Like I'll do this. Like, when the German's like, come here, come down here. And he's like, he puts his hand out and he's doing like the, okay, okay. And he like slides back down the plane and he just looks so sad. Like he doesn't even want to do that. Dude, it's great.
It is. It really is. And part of it is, I think, to me, is that every man aspect you mentioned, but the trappings are every man is the core of the film, but the trappings are this big, showy, manly man's adventure. And that's what the combination of that really is the secret sauce of the Indiana Jones franchise.
Hmm.
Like
And
going right from the
continues
get
to.
go, going right from the get go, you have the great opening sequence. How they introduce Indy. It's such an old school intro. You see him watching a throw. You see him from behind first. It's a shadow. You see him kind of stand up. You see him turn around. You get that look. Like this is you're automatically yeah, I'm in for something special here.
Yeah, and I think that continues to be part of the defining factor of these movies, man. There is something really just kind of wow factor about all that, as weird as that sounds. And in rewatching this and having the best time doing so, as always, one of the things that I also love is the way that this movie is paced and the way that the story is told. It is legitimately a serial adventure, and I can't think of a movie that opens with a more thrilling 10 minutes than Raiders of the Lost Ark. And
I
I say that as someone who loves Star Wars and Back to the Future and Die Hard and all these movies. Those movies all take time, right? They take time
they
to.
take their time to
Yeah,
debut. Yeah,
they
it's
take their time to do the things that they're gonna do. It's, like, very deliberate. This movie is a pretty big rocket out the gate. Yeah, the first 3 minutes is following a bunch of dudes through the jungle, but you're like, "What are these people doing in the jungle?" That's so interesting. You're watching it play out, and you're like, "What is happening?" And
right.
that reveal, like, that again, man, that back shot of Ford that first time you ever see him, like,
Right.
it's so good.
It's
The
just
whip
old
coming
school.
out, yeah, the dude tries to shoot him, but you look at this temple opening, it's so exciting
Yep.
because there's so much tension built into it, and also we gotta shout out a very young Alfred Molina already
Yes.
playing the villain part in the best way possible as Sapito, and you you're just in this world, in this moment where this temple is booby trapped, like, there's skeletons and spiders, and it you're like, "This is awful, what are they doing?" But then you see the idol, and it's like, "Oh, that he's kind of a grave robber type, like, he's
Right.
an archaeologist grave robber type." And he goes to get it. And I mean, look, man, the iconic moment, the iconic shot of Ford getting, kind of closer to his knees,
Yeah.
yeah, the putting his hand on his chin, rubbing it, looking at the idol, deciding what he's gonna do, trying to put that bag on, take the idol off, trying to, put like for like, and then the whole thing just crashing around him.
That perfectly describes Indiana Jones. He's the smartest guy in the room, and yet he's going to fail more often than not. And he does. You think he succeeds. It's a great moment because yeah, the best part about it, what encapsulates Indiana Jones most, is the sigh. He's like, all right, it worked. I turn around. I'm good to go. Ah, shit, no, I'm not. And then it starts crumbling around him. And of course, he has to run through, setting up all the booby traps he already knows they're there. Um, uh, and then, of course, you get the first big moment where Sapito takes a whip, swings over this chasm that's there. Uh, he betrays Jones, just drops the whip so Indy can't get it. Indy has to run and try to jump across the chasm, can't quite get there. And again, something else that encapsulates Jones. He climbs up, grabs this vine as the door is
Yep.
closing, has his grin on his face. Ah, good. And then the vine starts giving way. like, oh
Yeah.
god, it's a perfect one thing after another, bumbling after another. He makes it through.
And that's exactly it, right? You can't ask for better tension than everything that can possibly go wrong goes wrong in these moments.
Right.
Like that is it. And there's some of these great shots from down underneath where it's like a chasm underneath, and you're like, oh my god, if he slips and falls, he's dead.
Yep.
And they just really litter the entire movie with these little moments like
Mhm.
that. And you can't ask for something more exciting and more thrilling out the gate. You just can't.
No, and then you have to slide under the door and have to grab the whip, which becomes the quintessential Indiana moments, which gets repeated almost all the time. You always slide underneath these sliding doors, forget something, has to reach his hand down underneath, whether it's his hat, this time it's his whip. You know how many times I did that as a kid? Just
Oh
like that
yeah.
became like I would like my mom used to get mad at me because I used to close the garage door and do that, like risk my hand getting crushed because I would just do it because I wanted to do. I wanted to be
Oh, I
Indiana
mean,
Jones.
it was right there. You can't do that nowadays. They got all
No,
these sensors on the garage
sensors and
doors and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. But back then,
Oh
we
yeah.
could get away with it because I used to do the same thing. It used to drive my parents nuts. I
Yeah,
would
you're
try to
getting your
like
hand
roll
crushed.
underneath.
Yeah, you get
Um,
your hand crushed.
and
Probably
we had,
could.
oh man, it was
We
that was a
risked
good
death
time.
more than we actually thought we were doing at that point.
You know, as you look back, do you ever just look back on the stuff you did as a child and you just shudder thinking
Uh-huh.
about it, and you're
Uh-huh.
like, I can't believe I did that. That because
Yeah.
that's
That was so
been there.
stupid.
Yeah,
So
it's
stupid.
so dumb. I can't believe that I can't believe I'm still alive
Right?
a lot of the time. I'm like, "Oh, wow. We're lucky I'm here because I was doing incredibly dumb shit."
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
Um, I gotta say, man, this opening is iconic for all the reasons, though, that we keep talking about, but it's also just the way that it's shot, the way it's put together, the way it's paced. That's what I mean. I don't think you can ask for a better opening 10 minutes because it sets the stage for what the rest of this movie is gonna be, but it's just so damn exciting.
Well, just
It's so thrilling.
it's not even just a cold open. A lot of times cold opens are used just to invite to introduce the characters and it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. This one isn't. This one also uses this amazing adventure to introduce the villain of the movie. We get to actually meet Belloc, who comes into play later on. We get to see that Belloc is a clear rival to Indiana Jones. Obviously, not as physical as Indy. He does more of the smarmy. I'm going to just manipulate people to do things for me. But he's a great enemy for Indy. He beats Indy quite a few times in this in this movie, including this time in general. He gets the idol that Indy just risked his life for, just made it his way out, finally got out, and he loses the idol to Belloc, who is his main enemy at this point. But what a great way to
I
do
was
that!
also Paul Freeman is so excellent in this
Oh
movie.
yeah,
Just like a real dirtbag type where he's clearly in it for himself and the highest bidder. He doesn't actually seem to have any real moral standing other than he wants to be God
yeah.
and communicate with God. And I just think it's so funny. Like he's so smarmy and so terrible. And yet at the same time, he's so fucking charming. Like it's
Yeah,
such a great performance.
it totally is. And like he's a guy that like even he ends up working for the Nazis later on. We see that, but he's not a Nazi. He's just only using the Nazis to benefit what he needs to get. And that's his whole character right then and there. Like he uses people to get what he wants to get and doesn't care how he has to do it. Not like Indy. Indy is definitely a much more righteous, moral person, and that's the difference between the two.
Oh, absolutely. And I just I'm such a fan of Paul Freeman. He's a dude who he's just talented when he pops up in things, but something about that Belloc character, like he just ends up being the perfect antithesis and like the perfect villain for
Yeah,
this movie in particular. And I actually that's one thing I think the indie movies continually have just great villains, just
yeah.
period. Um this one just
Different
yeah,
villains, but good
different
villains.
villains, but they're always good.
Yeah,
And, you know, this sequence of events, though, as the movie unfolds and the opening keeps happening, like, it doesn't stop either.
no,
That's why the first 10 minutes, it's like you get out of the temple, like the boulder scene happens. Belloc is there. Then Indy runs from Belloc and the natives in that land, and he starts running down the and it's still like that way that the music flourishes, we all think of the shot of Ford running over the hill and he's being chased by people, like arrows being shot at him yelling at Jock to start the plane. It's all time for a reason, man.
iconic. It's iconic. I mean, this is
Yeah.
why you see that much later on, like the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. See Johnny Depp being chased as Jack Sparrow by the natives with the shooting guns. It all goes back to this
Oh, yeah.
iconic shot. This is what it is. And I love the fact we don't even. I love actually like the fact that we never see Jock again. Jock's just like a friend who was working that case. That's it. But he's those kind of characters with in his backstory. He has all these people like this, like all around the world. People he's worked with before and knows before, kind of can count on left and right. So whenever you meet a new character, it's not like it's out of nowhere. It has a built-in history with these people. It feels like they've been friends forever, even though we never see him again. Of course, we get to introduce the fear of snakes in the very same opening at that point. Right away, get to determine that there's a big snake in here. Grow a little backbone. Grow a little backbone. That's my friend Reggie.
Oh man, which is just the best, by the way.
So good.
Like, what a great name for a snake. So random, Reggie.
Reggie the snake, right?
One of the things I want to talk about too with this is that Karen Allen is so great in this movie, and Karen Allen's an actress who doesn't get a lot of love. To be honest, she's had a very quiet career for herself. To be honest, she's always great in the things that we all love, but so many people overlook. Like, she's in The Sandlot, she's in Malcolm X, she's in this. She has created this kind of every woman persona for herself. She doesn't act a ton. It seemed always kind of intentional when she would take stuff.
Right. Starman.
Yeah, I mean, Starman, of course,
Scrooged.
The Perfect Storm.
Scrooged.
Yeah, and Scrooge. She's done a lot, but not a lot, if that makes sense.
She wasn't a household name. She really wasn't, despite of all these things she's been in. It's not someone you own. Karen Allen. Yeah. No, because she was that kind of
yet for her, or for me with her, she is that good all the time. And I think in particular, she's great in this. And I think that she is still the quintessential indie girl for a reason.
Far. I mean, I'll get into it next episode. One of the big detractions from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is Kate Capshaw as Willie, and Willie is just an awful replacement for Marion. It's like she might be the worst indie girl. Marion is definitively the best, because Marion gets as good an introduction as Indy got.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, let's just to go back a little bit. We get the exposition. They use the opening sequence to get you actually into the action and everything else. We get the pull back a little bit of exposition through scene with Porkins from Star Wars, talking about the Ark and everything else and how it's going to be down. They have to take the government to hire Indy, move him on. But then he goes over this when we get this great introduction to Marion. We walk into a bar, and there she is, surrounded by all these ruffians and scoundrels. This guy who seems like he could outdrink anyone you could put your name on, and she beats him in a drinking contest.
Oh, it's the best. And one of the things about this movie, again, the globetrotting feel is so exciting and so cool. And this Nepal setting for half a minute, it feels so another planet almost, and it immediately sets the scene. They're in this bar, it's seedy, it looks real run down, it's snowing outside. This place looks like if you sneezed wrong, it's gonna fall over. And it's just this ragtag group of scoundrelly looking people, and yet Marion looks the most badass out of all of them.
Yeah, and it's her place. It's her place.
Yeah, and it's her place. That's the thing. It's her place. And you realize that, and you're like, God damn, how hard is she?
Yeah, how much hard is she? Exactly.
How just amazing, Yeah,
absolutely. And then we get the intro to Marion, and it's followed up by another reintro of Indy. And they use Shadow Indy so well. His shadow is so iconic throughout all the movies. But then again, there you go. You see that shadow, Indiana Jones is there. We get some great intro between them right away. They have a great chemistry as they argue about, obviously there is some past there and potentially scandalous in these days and age, but we shouldn't gloss over that too much, but it's left vague enough that we can not make any moral standpoints on things.
I'm not getting involved in that argument. I have no I have no love for that argument is all I'm going to say.
It is what it is. I mean, obviously it's something that if you shouldn't give it a complete pass, but it is what it is. We don't know the whole history, don't know the whole story. It's a couple of lines of dialogue of fictional characters, so we don't really know what to say about it. So I accepted it as a kid, and that's what I do now. I move past it. But Indy leaves again, and then we get the introduction to another great bad guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Tote.
Yeah,
T-O-H-T. Tot. Tote, whatever. What a bad guy this guy is. I love, he just comes in, just looks like this badass, is a very big German bad guy with great accent. very differently dressed than all the stormtroopers they have there. And he's very, very menacing. I love this guy. And he's throughout the film, he doesn't get a whole lot of time when he's on screen. He's very magnetic, very
He is,
charismatic.
and I've always loved he's like a very prototypical Bond henchman type.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
and I gotta say, like Ronald Lacey is just so creepy in this. Like there's something about the character that is just unnerving looking at him. He seems so slimy, and
Yes.
there's even the way he talks. There's like almost a he's almost giggling every time he opens his mouth, and you realize like there's just crazy behind his eyes.
I gotta
Like that's the
say,
best way to describe it. It's he's just got crazy behind his eyes.
and everybody else looks at him that way too. And I know I'm jumping ahead, but we'll come back. But like one of
Well,
my
no,
favorite
no, but
moments with
I mean
him,
that's what we do here. There's no rhyme or reason. We just do the thing.
the great moment is later on in the tent when he shows up and Bellick is there. Bellick and Marion are in the tent together. He comes in and they both are like terrified of him, and he takes out this device. Everybody, the audience, and they're like, "Oh my god, what are they gonna do to Marion? What is he gonna do with this thing?" And he folds it up, and it's a hanger for his
Oh,
coat.
just the best.
It's so
Just
great.
such a good moment, man.
And then Bellick and Marion sigh, just like the audience does. "Ah, okay, it's a hanger.
Well,
Okay."
yeah, because you're anticipating the absolute worst case scenario in this for obvious reason. Like,
Because that's who this guy is. That's who this guy is to
well, he
you.
also works for the damn Nazis. What are you
Right.
supposed to expect? Like, I'm gonna be honest. I also expect that he is doing something
Of
really
course.
terrible looking. You know,
Of
like
course. Of course. Uh,
it's that moment when he pulls it out when he pulls that hanger out, and you're like, "Good lord, it's a hanger." Like my first reaction is, "Good lord, it's a hanger." You're expecting it to be so much worse of a situation, and you're like, "No, no. In fact, it was
it's not a
just
torture
that,
device. It's not something to
not
choke.
a
It's not
torture
something to
device."
knock me
But
hiding with.
that's the movie that it's building, and that's what I've always liked,
Yeah.
is that because of how the movie is structured, because of the way the movie tells its story, you are anticipating the worst because how do you not?
Right. Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
everything to this point has been anxiety inducing the movie.
Right.
And the movie fall the it's so funny. I think about this a lot because I'm a kind of a passing fan of those Dan Brown books. The Robert Langdon books are not like great. They're passingly fun to read and they're trying to do the same thing. And as a book series, they're great. Like they're page turners. They're exactly the kind of thing that you want. They're built on the same sort of pattern that the Indiana Jones movies are
Yeah.
of, the characters are in a situation and the situation continues to escalate and you keep turning the page. They're great. The movies never found that same rhythm and
Yeah.
it's part of the detracting problem of those movies is that it's so oddly paced and you never feel like the situations get the same way. Like they're never paced in a way that every 10 minutes like something feels like it pushes it to the next part and it's
Right.
never as exciting. It's missing a lot of the inciting action for some reason in the same way that these are, and that's what makes this movie continue to stand out, I think, amongst the pack of all great adventure films, is that there's this just tangible nature to the way that everything is paced and the every situation is like the next step of a bad thing happening to the next thing, to the
Right.
next thing, to the next thing. Like it's so good at that cliffhanger storytelling that even when something good happens, you're waiting for the shoe
Right.
because you know it's going to be the next inciting incident to the next thing. Like it's so good at that build.
Absolutely. Even like the pauses. Like to be honest with you, watch this whole film. There's actually less action than you would think. But a
Mhm.
lot of the non-action is all spent building up this tension and building up to the next point of action. Because they do the best thing. That's partially because of Harrison Ford's personality. He gets there. He gets
Yep.
driven up. He has to recover, and during the recovery, he's going to get snarky. He's going to be humorous about it. But always something will happen, whether it's a discovery or whether it's a bad guy doing something to instigate something. It's always driving to that next beat.
Yeah, and I think that that's what's so exciting about the movie for me is that you watch it and it's just constantly thrilling because you're constantly on this level of waiting for things.
Right.
And I think that for a movie like this, you're right. It's actually not as actiony as you're maybe anticipating, but I was thinking about it last night as I was going through this, and I think I've had this thought before. I'm a big fan of the two National Treasure movies, and I actually
Mhm.
really quite liked the Disney Plus series too. A little bummed out it got canceled, but like also
Same.
ultimately not super shocked. Just one of those things.
Right.
But in watching this movie, one of the things that also stands out is that there's a tangible danger to everything, and it's a much more violent movie than you're also anticipating. There's not as much action as you might think, but it's also a lot more violent than you're anticipating.
Right.
Both can be true.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that some of the movies like Raiders, these ones that are chasing the movie, they're missing that action. They're missing that viscerally violent nature, as weird as that might sound, because the one thing that it's really good at reminding you is that the world that Indy lives in is not actually like safe. And
No. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
constantly dangerous. Everything around is the next corner that you turn, you could be faced with anyone, anything, and there's a knife or a gun or a bad guy waiting for him.
Yeah, well, you actually hit the nail on the head with that, especially in this one specifically, because we have that scene where Indy gets really dark because he thinks Marion's killed, or the great basket sequence where he's trying to find Marion who's trapped or hiding in a basket. He thinks this basket put on a truck, and the truck explodes because it's because of him, because he's trying to shoot out the truck to try to save her. All of a sudden, the truck explodes. We think Marion's dead, and he thinks Marion's dead, and he gets to the point where he is let's call him spade a spade. He's suicidal. He's sitting there
Yeah.
with an alcohol. He's here with a drink. He looks like he's ready to kill himself until he gets to see a Belloc again, who kind of sparks this more of a angry revenge plot instead of that. But he's kind of like he even has that line, like, "You want to meet your maker? I got nothing better to
Yeah.
do." It's
I was
like,
gonna say let's go together.
right, let's go together.
Which is the way he delivers that line is just beyond perfect.
It's great. It's great Harrison Ford at that point too. But that jumps ahead to I don't want to. I got to talk about one of my favorite moments in the movie is that bar fight back at Marion's. It's such a fun action sequence in this whole thing. You get great moments of wits, like Marion springing the drink from the sprung barrel of whatever drink that is. You have the moment where Indy's head is slammed to the bar and he just goes, "Whiskey." And she
Yeah.
gives him the bottle and smacks him on the head. It's a
He's a
great
man
fight
of
sequence.
resources, my friend. That's why. He's a man of resources.
Absolutely. But what a great battle between Indian Marion and the Nazi thugs,
And
including
again, to the point of what I was saying, like, it's also dangerous. It is a violent sequence. People are
oh
getting
yeah,
shot in the head, people are getting caught on fire, like, it's such a good moment, and you know what makes it better is the music, and we really haven't talked about it, but John
oof,
Williams's music
master.
throughout this film is its own character. Like, I listen to this score still to this day more than most scores probably. There is something so thrilling about the music in this movie because Williams really wanted to give it this bigger than life adventurous tone, and the music just elevates the sequences to like an apex degree.
Like
The Raiders March is the one of the most iconic themes of all time, but the rest
right,
of the movie is filled with the same type of iconic music.
absolutely. I mean, let's face it, John Williams is always does
He's
that
the
to me
GOAT
pretty
for
much.
a reason.
He is the go for a reason. He elevates every film he does. But yeah, his theme, his love theme, is it
Yeah.
lasts. Everything about it is like there's
Well,
those chords and
Marion's
blues.
theme too,
Right,
man.
yeah. Oh yeah, powerful stuff. And some subtly a lot of times. A lot of there's like these smaller themes they kind of maybe even don't remember. Like, oh, look at that, that's perfectly placed. Oh God, you can't imagine it without it at this point. It's a totally different movie without the score.
Well, and you know, people don't realize like a good score goes a long way, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
this is just one of those times. Like this is a great score that goes a long way in making a movie that much better. Like that's just how good it is. And it continues to be that good all the time. Like no matter how many times I've seen these movies, I'm thrilled when that Raiders theme kicks in, or Marion's theme, or the love theme, or the music towards the end of the movie. Like that there's so much happening here and he just gets it. It's just all the time. the music beats. It's almost as good as the needle drops in the James Gunn movie. Like,
No,
he's that good at doing it.
I mean, he's the kind of guy. That's why when we see those trailers, we get like a little emotional when the music kicks in. That's when it happens. When the indie theme
100%.
starts playing, that's what it is.
And that's why I love him so much. And to your point, this bar fight is just so cool.
Yeah.
There's some great moments, but also, the character interaction is so important here too, because it also lets Marion continue to be the badass. She really pushes Toad and the guys out in a way that pushes them to decide, oh, okay, well, we're going to push you because you clearly don't respect us. Well, why should she? You're Nazi scum, number one. But, also when Indy first shows up, that shadow door and the Indiana Jones, I always knew one day you'd come walking back through my door. Like, everything you ever needed to know about a relationship is done in
Yep.
that.
Absolutely. And yeah, and the fight serves the plot purpose of driving Indy and Marion back together. Obviously, Marion doesn't really
I'm
want
your
to help Indy.
goddamn partner.
Yeah, your goddamn partner. After the great burned hand sequence for Todd there,
Yeah.
he burned his hand. He's running out. Throws his hand in the snow. I feel the pain, my friend, my Nazi scum friend here. There, I feel the pain.
Yeah.
But
Well, he deserves it.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we get to go into Cairo, where we get to meet Salah. Of course, John Rhys Davies. What a great character Salah is. I'm so glad he's back for Dial of Destiny.
Mhm.
He is just he's so bombastic. He's so bright, so like just colorful, like everything about him. Well, I looked at like his look. He's like singing old musical songs at like the top
Oh,
of his
yeah.
lungs. I just coming out of nowhere. He has some great moments in Raiders. My favorite comes towards the end when he leaves, when he gets Indy and Marion on the boat, and she kisses him for like, this is for your children, this is for you, and gives him a kiss, and he says lingering, just like, oh my god, she kissed me. Oh my god! Then he starts singing one of his songs again. It's
Yeah.
such a great like. I love the dude. The dude's a great.
I
So funny
love
guy.
John Rhys Davies in these.
Yeah.
Saul is such a great character. I'm so glad that he is in Dial of Destiny
Yeah.
because I always think that the Saul character is such a great addition.
Yes.
The indie movies frequently have very cool characters throughout that help populate the world, but I think Sala as a character is always had a staying power that I don't think everyone else always does. I think it's the same thing with Marcus. Marcus has always just been such a great central figure to the franchise, and I think that the movies without them at times can feel lesser. Um, and that's just because they're characters that you like, and they add to this world and they add to the relationships that Indy has built over time, and they stand out for that reason. Um, I think that makes them special characters, and you're right, he's super colorful in this. The bad dates thing goes a long way too when he sees that the monkey was poisoned, and yeah, just grabbing the date and the bad dates. There's something about the character that just it works, and you can, again, there is definitely a Bond feel to all this because this was the American answer, quote unquote, to James Bond by Spielberg and Lucas. And, Bond has people throughout the world that he can go to, that he can rely on for information or whatever else. And the thing that I also like about Saw is he doesn't just sit around. Like, it's not just a one or two scene thing. He's actually in on the adventure. He has a whole section to himself and Indy being a part of all this, and I love that. When they go looking for Tanis and all of that sequence is great. And then opening it the top of the temple and the asps, very dangerous. You go first. Like, the solid character is great. He's in it to help his friend, but he also has kids. He doesn't want to die. You go do your thing. I'll stand here and wait. You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, what the hell happened?
I don't know.
My
I don't know
my
how often you've been trying to talk. I just saw you running your mouth again. If you stop
nope.
sneezing so goddamn much.
Actually, I wasn't seeing. I think I hit my wire on my mic. I think. Either way, what I was going to say is that line that line, "The ass is very dangerous. You go first," is probably the line I quote most from Indiana Jones. Me and my friends growing up would always just whatever any kind of situation is, we're just like, "Asps very dangerous. You go first." I love it's so good. It's so funny. And so encapsulates who Sala is. It's so great. To your point, I love his adventures with Indy. I do miss him. I miss him when he's not there. I
Me
missed
too.
him in Temple of Doom. I missed him in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I am very glad he's back for Dial of Destiny.
Yeah, and I know that Mangold said that he's not the only character who appears in it that we haven't
Right.
seen yet in the trailers, which makes me think that Marion is almost certainly also in the movie in some capacity.
I hope
Because
so. I hope so.
I
She
hope
deserves
so.
to be.
Yeah, I mean, they got married at the end of the last one. It would be very weird if you broke them up again.
No.
That would just be.
And even worse if
We
they
have to
killed
see
her
how
off.
it plays out. I don't want to
Yeah.
start getting in my head about that type of stuff. I always try hard not to.
Yeah.
But,
I agree.
I try to not overthink these things because at the end of the day, I'm there for whatever the story is by the creative team and the hope that
Yeah.
they would do. And I think Mangold knows what he's doing. So I
Right.
trust that he would handle that with,
The proper respect.
reverence and proper respect. Yes.
I do trust that as well. I think that we're going to find it's very simple, very question. And if she appears, I hope she does. If she does a good appearance, that'd be good to hear. It's kind of funny you mentioned that because Mangold mentions these characters going back. Unfortunately, in these day and age, some of them are no longer able to make appearances. Obviously, Marcus
Right.
is passed and everything else. Sean Connery's obviously passed. Um, so it's got to be someone we know, like Marion. It's got to be one of the people, unless we have that thing we are all kind of hoping for and hoping happened somehow, but we won't mention it until at least until next episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll go on from there. I agree, though. I
I'll
agree.
say
Trust the
too.
process.
Yeah. And, again, Marcus is another one. He's such a great character. Now, the funny thing about Marcus, and we'll get to it when we get to Last Crusade, is that Marcus and Raiders and Marcus and Last Crusade are
Not the same
vastly
character.
different characters.
Yeah.
But I still love the character.
Yeah, me too. Same as
Like,
me.
the character is so great, and I'm such a fan of Denholm Elliott, and I have been for the longest. I mean, he was always one of those guys. He'd pop up into things, and he'd always give a fun performance. Like I've always loved him in Trading Places.
Yeah.
That's the one. Like people don't think about it. He's such a bright spot in that movie. But he
Yes.
had such a career before this.
Oh,
Like he
God.
had
Yeah.
been in so many things because this is actually the back half of his career. Because
Yeah.
he unfortunately passes away not too terribly long after this movie. Like it's a decade later, basically.
Not even, I don't think. Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, what, 90, 92, maybe 93 passes?
Yeah, 92. I
Wow.
just looked. I was curious. Yeah. So he passes away. He passes away basically like a decade and some change
After Raiders, yeah.
after Raiders. So in like Last Crusade is 89. So like that's even closer to the end of that. But it's just weird when you look at it. It's like he's so fun in this movie, and the Marcus character is great because he's a centralizing figure. You only see him twice in the movie. Once Indy gets back from the initial cold open adventure, and then once he gets back from the big adventure. You
Right.
only see Marcus in that time, but the reason he's so great is that the character really feels like a defining father figure for Indy. And
Yes.
because we don't know a lot about his personal life, but he feels like the one who's kind of watching Indy, and there's more than like a work colleague relationship there,
Yeah, it
and
is.
you can feel it. Like,
Definitely familial kind of thing at this point
yeah,
beyond that. Yeah.
and you
Absolutely.
need that. It's a very tangible thing that gives weight to the adventure, as weird as that might sound, because the hope is that by the time Indy gets back, Marcus will still be there. You want
Mhm.
him to have something to,
Go home
you
to.
know, go home to, a friend, a colleague, a
Right.
family member that is there, and it grounds the character.
Yeah. Very much so. Very, very much so.
Yeah, and also you always need that, like, also the leader character, right? Like the man character, if you will. But then there's the bigger man of it all, which is, the
the
U.S.
government,
intelligence
basically.
agency,
Yeah.
government coming to them and being like, "Hey, we're really bad at this. We want your information."
And you're going to help us.
Yeah, and you're gonna help us. Um, One of the things too that I love about this movie, good lord, man, when the action beats hit, we were talking about that bar sequence, but the just insane car chase,
Oh,
horse
yeah.
chase, transport scene is one of the coolest goddamn action beats in any movie that has ever been made. Good lord, does this thing still hold up?
Oh, absolutely. Damage is done. Indy jumping from place to place. It's a lot of fun watching this action sequence. And you're right, it holds up better than many action sequences from the '80s. I can still feel like this was made to yesterday if you wanted to.
Well, it's the tangible feel of it is a big part of
Feels
it.
real. It
Mhm.
feels real. And part of it also Harrison Ford. Like the man, we've already mentioned this before at one point. The man gives the best punches in the business. It's the exaggerated, like you feel his punch. They feel real. They feel heavy. They feel like they connect. They connect. And it's part of the sound effect, but it's also just how Harrison Ford does it. It makes you feel every single punch.
Mhm. And, nothing hits dum quite like the sound of an indie punch in a
Yeah,
movie.
that's what it is. It is
It
totally that.
just it's so special and it's so fun and you hear it and you're like, "Good lord, man." Just so excellent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, I just love the sound of it, but this whole sequence is so thrilling and you have so much that happens in it. Like him driving the truck, getting shot, like being tossed out of the truck, climbing back into the truck.
yeah.
There's so much just coolness to it.
Oh yeah, and him like riding the truck and like knocking cars over, knocking other cars over, and bikes over. It's just a fun moment throughout it, and it takes a long time, but it's done well. That's it's like you'll feel the time. It just feels like you just want to see what's going to happen next. What else can they throw it into, and how else is he going to succeed?
Yeah, and I love it for that. Like
Yeah,
it's so thrilling and in rewatching this in prep for the podcast, it just, I said it a little bit ago, it feels tangible and I think that I'm always going to be a proponent of people using technology to make their movies. Technology is
right,
wonderful. It helps make anything you can think a reality in some sort of way, right?
right,
Without technology, something like Guardians is not going to look nearly as impressive with its space sequences and stuff. All
right,
that being said, there's something about a real tangible adventure film like this where every punch feels landed and real, even though you know it clearly isn't. And these sets are real and these trucks are real. And that is a real man being dragged underneath a truck, climbing into the back of another truck. And
right,
like there that tangible nature, man, even the temple sequence is that incredible because when everything starts to crumble, that's real debris falling around Indiana Jones. That
certainly
is
is.
not like a made up manufactured thing, and you feel like you're enamoredly wrapped in this moment because it feels tangible.
Right,
That's scary in the best way, and it
absolutely.
works.
Absolutely.
Um,
Speaking of all the tangibility, like even before the car chase, the one thing we didn't actually mention is well, we mentioned it briefly towards the beginning, the fight with the big old Nazi played by Pat Roach,
yeah.
who is, by the way, just a Indiana Jones superstar. He's obviously the German mechanic in this one. He is the chief thuggy guard in Temple of Doom. And he's also a Gestapo agent in Last Crusade. So he just makes his rounds as the indie bad guys, basically.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
he's great at it because, I mean, he's their stunt coordinator and stuff like that
right.
too, so let him have a big moment, you know?
And it worked. And this is the realness of it. You have this guy fighting on top of a plane that's like spinning around, and Indy looks at him like he kind of comes down gleefully. Come on, Indy. Like, Indy looks at him and is like, he knows he's gonna fight him. He knows he's gonna get his ass kicked to a degree, but he's got to fight it because that's what Indy does, and he forces Indy to fight dirty. We've talked about before, the man's man, right? But this is where the fight. He has to throw sand in his face. He has to bite him. He has to claw him because otherwise he's going to get his ass completely handed to him.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's just, and again, to your point, right? Or to the thing we were talking about earlier, Indy is the everyman. So that's what that makes it so much better is like he just looks tired.
He's like, oh, look at this guy. Look at this big fucker.
And that dude is huge.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things too is I love that the fist fight keeps going and it's real bloody. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of blood in this sequence as they keep punching each other back,
Yeah.
over and over and over again,
Yeah.
And it's bloody and violent, and yet you're like, man, good lord, this man can take how many punches and is
Right.
still standing? Like, poor Indy, you just know that there's no winning here, and the fact that the only way to beat him is to that little grin when he realizes, by the way, that that propeller is coming straight for that Nazi, and then he like ducks underneath it.
Right.
Oh,
The best part about it is because he sees it coming, he plays, he's like, oh, I'm gonna trick him by getting ready to go. Come on, yeah, just keep your eyes on me, keep your eyes on me.
yeah. But it's that little smug smile on his face too. You know what I'm saying? I just, good lord, man, it's just so good.
Ivan Levy comes down, his first punch. All right, I'm gonna punch you. Gives all he has, big Indiana Jones punch. The guy barely moves. He's kind of like, and he gets knocked out.
And dude, Ford sells it too. Like that punch he throws is so much. Like it's so strong, and he throws so hard, he ends up on the other side of the guy.
Yeah.
And then he does it again.
Well, he gets punched.
He gets punched in the face, and he falls on his ass.
He does this great, almost exaggerated knee buckle. He goes,
yeah.
It's such a great fight, though.
And it's so funny, like, we're talking about this, but one of the episodes of season 2 of Mandalorian is like, or is it season 2? There's a fight on top of a transporter with the Mandalorian. It was in the Bill Burr episode. I think it's the second one.
Season 2.
Yeah,
season 2. Yep.
But it's so reminiscent of this. Because Mandalorian is fighting this dude, this big ass guy, and like he just can't seem to stay standing. He's like falling down, and it's straight up modeled after this.
100%. It's a great fight, though. It's a great fight.
It's so good, but that shows the staying power, right? And like the way that filmmakers still to this day see this sequence as something that is worth following.
Yeah. Because it resonates.
Yeah, dude, it's so goddamn good. And I think that is the most telling thing about this series as a whole, and this movie in particular, is the defining traits that it keeps leaving behind all these years later. Like, over the last 42 years, people are still looking at this movie as something that is worth exploring and aping because it stands the test of time, because it's so goddamn fun.
Timeless. It's timeless.
It's timeless. It's honestly, it might be the most timeless of many of the films of the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This is one I would consider to be in my at least top 5 of like the timeless. Like this could be made anytime because it's well, I mean, it doesn't hurt that it's like a period piece anyway. It's a movie from the 80s set in World War II era. So it has that kind of timeless feel already to it. Because it's spanning so many years as it is. The time it's set, the time it's made. So it just feels like it could have been made last year about the 40s or 30s or 40s. It is exactly what you said. To your point, it's timeless of all time. Of course, the next bit is again one of those moments in between, which really adds to the character. We get to see Indy and Marion join this this boat that's going to be taking them home.
With the
George Harris.
Yeah, I was going to say the
Katanga.
Unfortunately aptly named, if you will, Kingsley Shacklebolt from the Harry Potter franchise.
Indeed, yes.
Aptly named, allegedly, by the way, not at me saying that.
Yes.
That is a choice that was made by an author. Is all I'm getting at.
That is true. That is very true. But it leads to some great moments with George Harris, and but the moment here is specifically for Indy and Marion again. Of course, get some of my favorite lines of dialogue in the movie. Of course, the the whole it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage.
Mm-hmm.
It shows exactly what you said before. He's so tired. He's so beat up. He's been through everything. He's stretching. He's sore, just trying to get some rest. Marion starts initiating some lovemaking. And here's where it is. This is where the Bond difference ends. In a Bond movie, James Bond is making sweet, sweet love to Marion despite all the action that just went on. Indy starts getting kissed and caressed, and he falls asleep.
I mean, look, man, if I had gone through the shit that he had gone through too, I also would have gone to sleep.
Absolutely. Same thing. But it's a great pause, great moment before we get to pile up
And
the
again,
action again.
talk about a moment that's like just a good character moment.
Yes.
Like this moment between them is so wonderfully handled and sweet and nice, and
And needed.
it just
Needed.
hits, man, and needed. Yeah, like it's just a good moment.
Yeah.
And more movies need to take the time to breathe. I think that there's so many people who chase just unrelenting pace and forget that sometimes a character just needs to sit
Yeah.
and vibe
Absolutely.
and be the thing. And that's what I love about this moment in particular, is that it's just such a fine moment.
Exactly. And again, like I said, it's needed before you amp it back up. And the Nazis come again. They're unrelenting. And they take Marion in, and they take the Ark back. And Indy has to sneak. This is actually one of the more controversial moments of the movie, where Indy somehow sneaks aboard a sub or whatever. I never
Well,
cared about that as a kid.
there's like a deleted scene where I think it was on the bigger Blu-ray release, and they finally put it on there, and essentially it's like he never even boards the submarine. The submarine stays basically towards the
Above ground.
like above the water, and he
Gotcha.
just holds on to it all the way through. Like that it was explained, they just cut it out of the movie. I mean,
Gotcha.
again, that's one of those, do you need it? Probably not. People love to make complaints about it, but it's like, look, man, in a world where he's gone through some of the stuff he's already gone through, I'm not going to be mad that he also gets that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like
Absolutely.
if it never fully submerges, it never fully submerges. That's good enough for me.
100%. 100%. I don't care what it's. I just make fun of it. I just like to
Oh,
mock
I
it as
do
well
too.
too. I don't
People
care.
love to just be mad about things
And
for no
nitpicky about
reason.
things.
It's
It's
so
like, who
dumb.
cares? Who cares? So he stuck onto the board of the ship, whatever. Either way, I got some great stealth mission indie, including one of my favorite parts, something you don't see very often, something you always question. Speaking of nitpicking stuff, he knocks out a Nazi guard and tries to put his uniform on, and it does not fit.
It's too small.
It's too small. I love man, big
It's
man in a
such a
little
good
coat, so to
moment.
speak.
It makes me wonder if the scene in Die Hard when McClane's like, of all the people I kill the terrorist with feet smaller than my sister. When he wants the shoes, like that feels like a very deliberate nod to this.
It does. It does feel like that, really. um, so we get to the part where obviously make it to the island where they're going to open up the Ark. At this point, we haven't mentioned that that's what they're going after the whole time. It's the original Lost Ark, the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, is that what they're looking for? I love, by the way, when the Ark of the Covenant stuff is even brought up and the government officials are coming through on all of it, and he starts to explain it, and they just have like this dead look on their face. He
Blank.
goes, "Either of you guys go to Sunday school?" Like, because that's such a real answer for such a specifically very funny thing to me. Because as a recovering Christian,
Recovered.
yeah, as a recovering religious Christian child, like the Sunday school thing is so on point, because I was dragged to that shit week after week, and I
Right.
remember all those names and all those goddamn stories for this
Right.
exact reason. And it's like, god damn, like I just love that the way he does it, because it's very pointed, if you will, at people who are like making laws based on these things and then actually not knowing what these things
Material.
are. And I've talked to you about this. I think that Spielberg has a very snarky bitter, pointed message through the 80s about
Yeah.
the way that America is and is run, and I'm not trying to, like, sway anyone on anything, but every one of his movies, whether he wrote it, directed it, or produced it, has an air of the dark side of the American dream, and that's what I've always called it, is Amblin's Dark Side of the American Dream. Like, it doesn't matter what you're watching, Poltergeist or Goonies or Indiana Jones or, like, any of the stuff he did, E.T., that all those things through the 80s have this, like, lingering sense of dread when it
Yeah.
comes to the American dream, and, like, it's a tangibly beautiful thing that is not nearly as s nice as it seems,
Yeah.
and I think that that moment in particular, and then, of course, the bookend to that is that the government takes the Ark of the Covenant, they have no idea what they have, and Indy says that,
This needs to be
"Fools,
studied.
bureaucratic fools."
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's taking care of it? Top men. It's just it's well handled in such a specific way, and again, really shows that, like, dark side of the American dream of people who actually are in positions of power that probably shouldn't be, or how they're handling things, and I
Right.
just always love that moment because it just still rings true to me,
Right. Same.
in a very specific way. So you look
Yeah.
at it and it's like, yeah, the Sunday school thing kills me every single time. And then Indy just knowing that stuff. And you know what? I also love that because it shows that he's also that well read of a character. He looks a lot more shabby than you're maybe expecting, and he's the professor and stuff, but like he's actually a well educated dude too.
Yeah.
Like he
Oh yeah.
knows what he's talking about. He
100%.
has his certain traits of things that he may not know because Abner Ravenwood, he was like he's always he's the expert in all the Ark of the Covenant stuff, but
Right.
he's well read enough that he still knows what he's talking about.
He knows
He's good
enough.
at it. He knows
He
enough,
knows enough.
and the way he explains the story, just all of it, like even Marcus knows what they're talking about, and these government officials just know nothing.
Dick. They know dick.
Yeah,
That's it. I actually love that about those sequences too. Honestly, the idea. I love the connection between his characters because Indy actually feels a lot like Han Solo at moments. There's a lot of like, I don't believe this magic hocus pocus stuff. And there's another line there where he's talking to Marcus when he has the gun in there. He's like, this is like something you've never gone after before. There's something special, something different. You gotta be careful. And he turns to him. He's like, you know how cautious I am, and tosses the gun into the thing. And it feels just like a Han Solo line. Hey, it's me, kind of thing. So I got to see a lot of Harrison Ford in that snarkiness about being, first of all, anything magic wise, and of course anything as far as overconfidence goes. Just such mirror of those characters he's been playing, and I love noting those little similarities between two of my favorite characters of all time.
yeah. I mean, look, Ford at the end of the day is an all-time actor. He's one of my favorites for a reason, and I totally got Lucas's reservation of not necessarily wanting him to be Indy again because sure, I do get it.
Yep.
There is a part that's like, am I going too far using one actor in a role? But at the same time, man, I am just glad he did because at the end of the day, this character is so defined by the personality trait that is Ford, and there is a comparison to be said between Han and Indy, but at the end of the day, I think the one that is truly the honest version of who Ford really is Indiana Jones, and I
Oh
think that's
yeah.
why he has such a love and a reverence for the character and continues to try to find a way to reinvent the character and say the things that he wants to say with him. I mean, he was the one who like kind of single-handedly finally forced the hand of Spielberg to direct the fourth one to begin with, and then
Yeah.
like basically was like, "Look, I want to do this fifth one. If you don't want to do it, I want your blessing, but I want to do this. I have something left. There's something inside of me still."
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's so goddamn cool about it.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I really want to see Dial of Destiny because seems like he wants to have that one more definitive statement on the character. I can't wait to see what that is. I can't wait to see what that is. Something
Me
like, I
too.
mean, in the trailer, he has a whole moment. I've been looking for this my whole life. It feels like
Yeah,
it feels like Harrison Ford seeping through the character there a little bit.
100%. And that's again exactly what makes it special. And And I just look at this movie and it ends up being like, lightning in a bottle is a real thing. And the fact of the matter is that it would be impossible to ever capture the magic of this first film specifically again. Like, it's just the right amount of certain people can't get the roles, certain
Right.
things had to happen for things to go the way that it did. And yet at the same time, thank God it did, because this movie is better off for every little change that happens. I mean, we haven't even talked about there's the foot chase through Cairo.
Yeah.
And there's that one moment in it that everyone talks about where the swordman shows up and Indy just shoots him. It's a great moment for the character again, and in this everyman moment, he's just tired and he
Yeah.
just decides to shoot the swordsman. But it also came from a place of they were behind shooting. Like,
You're feeling
there's
sick that day.
yeah, like Ford has pushed back on the sick part. I don't know how true that is or not.
All right.
But like the point is that at the end of the day, that was supposed to be like this much bigger sequence involving the whip. And he was like, I don't really want to overdo that with the character.
Right.
And I kind of respect that there's these little moments and choices that they made in that they just scrap a bigger set piece for that moment.
Right. And that's what it's best about it, though, because that moment, sometimes that instinct makes for better moments, because a big whip fight sequence would have been fine or whatever. But the moment where he pauses for a second, watches the guy do his sword, take out his gun and shoot him, and just turn and walk away is so funny. And it's so Indiana Jones that, like, sometimes you got to go with your instincts, and sometimes they show you the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. And you know, I look at this movie in particular as something that's just incredibly special in general. It doesn't matter how we talk about it. Is it all the acting choices and like casting choices? Yes. Is it every action beat in the movie? Yes. Is it every way that Spielberg directs the film, like, very specifically? Yes.
Yes.
Is it the Lucas ideas of it all?
Yes.
Yes. Again, you couldn't ask for lightning in a bottle in a better
Perfect
way.
storm.
And there's still, as we've talked about, there's already three more of these movies, plus the TV show, plus the comics, plus the books. And you know what, man? At least in this guy's opinion, there's really not a bad indie adventure to be had. And that, I think, also just proves the point of this character is so malleable in such a specific way, in the way that Spielberg and Lucas and Ford created him,
Yeah.
that you could do so many cool different things with him and it never feels wrong.
Right.
And I say that out loud, and I know there's people throwing their iPods or cassette players or hitting their radio right now. They're real mad at me for saying that, because I know that there's a lot of people who think that Crystal Skull is some sort of monstrous beast. But like, I can't wait to tell you guys about how much I fucking love that movie later. And you go, I'm sorry, what? I've had this conversation with too many people at this point that I have changed their minds on how they see the movie.
Likewise, same thing. We both talked about this
Yeah.
many times. I mean, we're both on the same side when it comes down to it. Although I must say, there, my friend, I didn't know that people downloaded us and put us on cassette tape and listened to us before throwing their cassette tapes. But I'm here
Hey
for it.
man,
That's
look,
true.
I'm hoping that there is. I've always wanted to believe that someone listened to our voice on a cassette, so I wanted to throw it out there. So I hope that someone somewhere just was like, they still have that little Sony Walkman.
Nice. I love it. I love it.
Look, man, I love the Sony Walkman. All right, do you remember? You
I
remember the
do.
Walkman? That was good
Of
stuff. And
course.
then we had the CD players. And remember
This,
trying to put a CD player in your pocket, and you would walk around and you would hope it wouldn't skip. And then they had to start making anti-skip
right.
ones. Oh my god, dude! The people don't know how good they have it now. You iPod children, like, it must be nice to have just grown up with stuff that functions pretty much the way it's supposed to. Like, every once in a while, an iPod, like, it'll glitch out and it might be a problem, but for the most part, like, iPods function the way that they're supposed to. They play music. There's no skipping involved. You have
Right.
an entire radio station in your pocket. Like, must be fucking nice. Us, we're like hoping that the 12 CD. We were hoping our CD didn't scratch. We were hoping the cassette tape didn't rip. You having to like not have the tape get eaten when you put it into a tape player. My God, man, we had it hard
We did.
back in the day.
We walked uphill both ways.
Yeah, you're damn right. In the snow, in the sleet, in the rain, in the heat. Like, people don't focus on the heat of it all. You know how many times I almost had heat stroke as a teenager, as a child, walking to and from the bus stop,
I'm
going to
sure.
and from school?
I am
Like,
sure.
oh my God,
Quite
man.
sure. So,
God.
speaking of heat stroke,
No, wait, I'm not done yet. I'm not
okay,
done yet.
go
And
ahead.
then these kids have the audacity these days to have these headphones that are wireless. Do you know what it was like to walk around with wired headphones and trying to have a backpack on, and you're like walking through school and you're trying not to get tangled in, or like the wire getting tangled on doors? Like, oh my God, dude.
Are you done now?
I guess you're making me. I don't want to. I'm enjoying this.
Speaking of heat stroke,
Yeah.
let's talk about that final sequence there, the final special effect inducing.
Wow, what a transition. I don't think that was heat stroke, brother. I'm going to be honest with you. That is
That's how I felt when I got heat stroke. I thought my face melting off just like that.
No, the melting off. I thought you were talking about the Nazis getting holes burned through them. I was like, that is a very different thing than heat stroke, my guy. Like,
no,
I'm just saying.
Melting off. That's when I feel like the heat stroke's coming in there.
Yeah, all right. I'll say this. This third act ending is super interesting because it's not a big action beat.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's Christopher McQuarrie learned from this, in my opinion, and it's why I still adore Rogue Nation the most out of the Mission Impossible movies. Is I think that the Mission Impossible movies are all great to varying degrees, but that fifth one has the start big and get smaller as it goes thing that it does, and it ends with like a small chase sequence that ends up capturing the villain. That movie kind of pulls from this, which is it's not a big action beat. The villains all get killed by their greed, and they're like, Belloc is like, we should look first. I just want to see before we take this to Hitler.
Right.
If like we didn't fuck this up, but he's actually doing it just for his own personal gain.
Right.
And that is his undoing.
Yeah, because the best part about it, like I said, is that Indy is caught. He's captured. Mm-hmm. If Belloc just brings them all to the Nazis, this is game over, and Indy loses. So in a way, Indy like is lucky that Belloc decided to be his own undoing. All we have there is Indy basically recognizing what's going on and realizing from Sunday school what's going on, telling Marion, "Don't look at it. Don't look at it."
Yeah.
And instead, we get the great heat stroke of World War II. And got guys faces melting off. And what is a great horrifying sequence, even as a kid. I remember my kids being a little grossed out by it when I first let them see it to a degree. It's such a good sequence. And the holes being burned through bodies. It's a big fuck you to the Nazis all at once. And I kind of feel like Spielberg wanted to do that. Let's just get them all out of the way at once. One big battle of defeating some Nazis.
I remember being so freaked out the first time I watched this when the faces start to melt and the heads explode. Man, PG movies could go hard back in the day. Number one.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever saw it, my mom kept trying to shield my eyes, but I kept doing like this. I was, for the audio listeners on cassette out there, I'm moving my head around because I kept moving around her hand because she kept trying to block it. I was like, I want to see what's happening. I've already seen a lot of weird shit tonight, and I'm going to see this all the way to the end. And she tried it with Last Crusade too, and it was the same reaction was, I am going to watch this. And I think that this actually boils down to why I like horror movies so much.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, wow, that was a thing I hadn't thought about until this moment. But anyway, I just remember being so like horrified and yet entertained and thinking it was the coolest thing I had ever seen.
Same.
Because I was like, oh my God, that man's face melted. Oh my God, that man's face melted too. Oh my God, his head exploded. And as a kid, it was like, well, kind of.
So
in that moment. And can I say, by the way, it's really funny when we start doing the show and it's like real early for me after like having worked, and I'm always like kind of tired at the beginning. When we start going, by the end, I'm like ramped up like I've been on cocaine or something. I'm like a crazy howler monkey.
I gotta go watch this movie again.
Yeah, now I'm like, I want to like go run through a wall now and go watch Raiders all over again because it's like,
Fair,
man, I'm so hyped. This movie's the
fair.
best ever. Second best ever. Back to the Future would like a word, but I
I
think
think Empire Strikes Back might want a word too for me, but I get it. It's one of it's definitely up there.
that's not how you say Return of the Jedi, but that's
Uh,
fine.
no, it's not. No, it is not.
I just wanted you to be sure that you knew you were saying the wrong movie.
I know.
It's
I know. I'm saying the right movie. It's the correct movie.
no. They don't. I believe the correct answer is Return of the
Empire
Jedi.
Strikes Back.
No, Return of the Jedi.
Empire Strikes Back.
Return of the
Empire
Jedi.
Strikes Back.
The Empire Strikes
Empire
Back.
Strikes Back.
No, God damn
Yes!
you! I was hoping I could trick you into doing it.
And unfortunately, you tricked
The
yourself. You
plan did not
played
work out.
yourself. You played
No,
yourself.
you played yourself.
Anyway,
Played you.
so what a great fucking movie. If we're gonna rank, I don't even know. We don't even have to rate this movie. This is an 11.
It's an 11 out of 10 out of
10
a million.
Yeah, it's both perfect 11s for us. No, we need to.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's no world where we actually have to
rate this at all.
Rate this because this is it does not get better than this.
No, it is.
There's not. It's a perfect film, and I know that there are plenty of people who will argue the like indie doesn't matter. I hate that argument, by the way. That
Oh, me
indie doesn't
too.
matter to the story. Like I strongly detest that Big Bang Theory had an entire episode dedicated to this because it's only like made that entire argument more like
Yeah.
I don't even want to. It's put it out there more for other people, and I hate that argument. I think it's just garbage.
I don't mind the argument at first because I think it's a silly argument, but it's the fact that people take it seriously that annoys the hell out of me. Like once you get past it, like, oh, it really means something. It's like, what are we doing here? Like if you throw it out there, it's kind of like, it's kind of a chuckle. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny, but people take this like to heart. I'm like, kind of like, no, knock that off, knock that shit off. You can miss me with that, as the kids would say.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm just absolutely not here for any of those shenanigans at all. Right. But boy, man, like as far as movies go, you just cannot do better than this film. And it's funny because this ends up being a sort of beginning for Amblin really having this big run in the 80s.
Yeah.
Again, like it's an almost iconic run for me and like a very defining run for me for the next 9 years, 10 years of the stuff that Amblin's doing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the stuff Amblin will do after the 90s or after the 80s is good too. But like this specific run from like 1980 all the way through the 90s is just so specifically targeted at who I am as and like what I've become and the type of entertainment I enjoy and the stuff I look for in the movies that I enjoy. And this movie is centerpiece to it. Between this and Back to the Future, like it's just a centerpiece of who I became. And I love that. And revisiting this and gushing about it couldn't be more fun for me.
100%.
Like this is just the best. I just wanted to sit and here's the thing. I could talk about this movie for another 3 hours because I don't think we even touched on nearly everything I would like to touch on. Like, I mean,
it's a danger of how we do things because the way we jump around, but it is what
right.
it is.
And you look at it, and it's like the Ark of the Covenant as a device, as a plot device, is fascinating. You could have gone with anything, and the Ark of the Covenant, it was the choice, and the way that it's handled and used is fascinating and dangerous and scary. And that's the thing. I actually like that at the end of the movie, the Ark of the Covenant is a lot more terrifying than you're even anticipating. And like they show you up front what this thing can do, right?
Right. Lightning from here. They show you the picture of everybody going down. So you basically show you a picture of what's going to happen at the end of the movie, basically.
Yeah, but you never think it's actually going to get there.
Right. We don't.
You know what I mean? And I love, by the way, the good Lord. Yeah, I think they said the same thing. Just little things like that. I mean, in this movie's got a wry sense of humor. We didn't really talk about that either. This movie is really funny, but it's always at the right moments of levity needing, and a lot of the time it's also kind of dark.
Right.
It's also got its heart on its sleeve. Again, it's such a love letter to like the older serials and things like that. But also, I love the stuff between Indy and Marion. They're
Me too.
such a great couple. And I know that we kind of touched on it and I don't really want to get into it, but like at the end of the day, the version of them that we meet is so great that I can look past whatever else you want to look at in the capacity of whatever happened there. Like them as adults as a couple is excellent.
100%, 100%. And it's where we are now. And they end up being very happy at the end, just like we are. And I'm happy to get Karen Allen back. That's one other thing about Crystal Skull, getting Marion
Mhm.
back in the fold was a brilliant stroke of genius and well needed genius.
A
Um,
well-needed one in
yeah.
particular, absolutely, but, man, this is a goddamn miracle of a film, it is, continues to be great and will continue to stand the test of time. I think that this is an all-time movie for a reason, man, and it just doesn't get better.
Absolutely. And any last words before we get out of here?
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
Great, Mo. Allison. Last thing I gotta say is similar to you. This movie is a perfect movie on every single level, as far as like story wise goes, character wise, relationships between characters, humor, score. There's nothing this film gets wrong, and we are very much better for having it, and for the rest of the series as well. And I can't wait for more. So we both give it an 11. So that is going to wrap it up for this week. Our great love letter to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Stay tuned for 2 weeks from now. We move on to the 1984 sequel, Indiana Jones: The Temple of Doom, which is a little less loved in the community, but overall, I still think a phenomenally fun banger of a movie. There's a lot to love in this one. This is actually maybe when I was a kid, my favorite of the three. When I was a kid,
When I was a kid, it was my favorite too.
I think it shows to it why it is like it's got. I think it's why it's kind of less loved now, because it is a little more kid friendly to a degree in some ways.
Yeah,
In
I was
some
gonna
ways.
say, and in other ways, there's
It's
no
not.
world where that should have been our favorite at all because we probably should not have been watching it. But you know, things happen.
Reason we get PG-13 movies. But it is what it is. I love it though. I love it tremendously, and I can't wait to talk about that with you. I can't wait to talk about Last Crusade and Kingdom of Crystal Skull as well. But until then, where can the folks find you?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell, and hanging out here doing the thing, you know, having a great time. Although I'll say this, I want to see the original 3-hour cut of this movie. That's all.
Yes,
I would love to know what it looked like.
please,
Just saying.
someday. Hopefully someday. Maybe someday. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, you can find me at Paul_DGU on Twitter. You can find me here all over the place doing Holy Snokes Star Wars podcast weekly with Matty Gunner, Class Action on the alternate weeks of To Mediocre Way 2's on film. Review with Lego. Got some more episodes on V, The Final Battle coming. Well, actually, you guys haven't even seen. No, you did. I released the first one, V, the original miniseries one. Now I have V, The Final Battle, which I recorded the first one of last night with Lego. That should be coming out in early June. More coming there, of course. And the Harristons will be coming in the summer, I promise. If this is your first time here, hit that like, hit that subscribe if you like us. Stick around for more. Share us. Build our community out. Our YouTube, we are on the goal towards 500 subscribers here. We have hit 409 recently, so we are moving forward. Slowly but surely, we got to that 400 mark. Let's hit that 500 mark. And if you'd like to support even more, we have Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Project, with such notable patrons as Austin Goodell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't keep the lights on without you. So we truly do appreciate you. But we understand if you can't do Patreon. I get it. Totally get it. But you can support us by liking, just by sharing it, letting people know that we are here. But yeah, that should do it for us, guys. I can't wait. Until next time, I guess, stay mediocre. Never underestimate the power of mediocrity.
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.